Reborn, my fiancé, chose my cousin at the altar. This time I thanked him before the king. The iron cuffs around my wrists were colder than the snow blowing through Frost Tower. Below, grain wagons rolled toward the northern border beneath my family seal. The kingdom believed I had stolen those stores and starved 3 provinces. My fiancé, Lord Dorian Ashcombe, had signed the accusation. My cousin Maris wore the wedding crown that had once been prepared for me. I died before sunrise. Then the tower vanished. I opened my eyes at the royal altar 6 months earlier, with King Edric watching from the throne dais. Dorian was supposed to take my hand. Instead, he turned to Maris. "I cannot marry Elara," he announced. "My heart belongs to her cousin. In my first life, I begged him to honor our betrothal and later gave him access to every Vale granary. This time, I removed my ring and bowed. Thank you for choosing before I signed the transfer." The king leaned forward. "What transfer?" Dorian's smile disappeared. "In my first life, Dorian's betrayal at the altar did not end our alliance. It only changed who wore the wedding crown. After the guests were dismissed, Helena took me into the chapel vestry and placed the granary transfer before me. "House Vale cannot survive a public break with Ashcombe," she said. "Maris will marry him, but you will keep the northern stores stable." I asked why I should give Dorian the authority meant for my husband. "Because duty is larger than humiliation." I signed. That signature gave him access to 3 granaries, 2 river ports, and the Vale seal for emergency transport orders. Dorian married Maris within days. I returned north and continued the work he had claimed as his own. At first, the changes looked efficient. He replaced old wagon masters with men loyal to Ashcombe. He moved inspection records from the storehouses to his military office. Maris began sending sealed requests for private deliveries, describing them as gifts to Crown allies. I corrected their mistakes before anyone noticed. When 12 wagons disappeared between Brackenford and the capital, I used my own grain reserves to fill the shortage. When damp wheat was reported at Eastmere, I ordered healthy stores moved in overnight so the soldiers would not go without bread. Tamsin Reed warned me that the ink ledgers no longer matched the carved tally boards. "Someone is changing the numbers after the wagons leave," she said. I told her Dorian was reorganizing the routes. She held up a ferry cord tied with 7 knots. "The ledger says 11 wagons crossed. I should have stopped everything then. Instead, I feared a scandal would prove that House Vale could not function after my father's death." I ordered another recount and kept the discrepancy quiet. The shortages grew. Farmers were told their deliveries had arrived when their wagons had never reached the royal roads. Storehouses listed grain as spoiled, yet private merchants sold fresh Vale wheat at twice the usual price. Maris wrote to me whenever questions reached court. "Please handle this," she would say. "Dorian is under terrible pressure." So I handled it. By winter, 3 northern provinces faced hunger. Dorian appeared before King Edric, with ledgers bearing my seal, receipts bearing my name, and records of the grain I had purchased with my own money. He called those purchases proof that I had been replacing what I stole. Maris stood beside him in white fur. "Elara never recovered from the wedding," she said. "She became obsessed with controlling the stores." I looked to Helena. She lowered her eyes. "The king ordered my arrest before I could reach the physical tallies in the north. In Frost Tower, a guard told me Ashcombe wagons still crossed the border under the Vale seal. Only then did I understand. They had not framed me to hide a few stolen shipments. They had used my silence to build a famine, and my name to survive it. The cold of Frost Tower remained in my bones as sunlight poured through the chapel windows. For one breath, I expected iron cuffs. Instead, silk covered my arms. My father's silver ring rested on my hand. Before me lay the marriage register and the transfer granting Dorian authority over 3 Vale granaries and 2 river ports after our vows. The ink was still wet. King Edric's question silenced the chapel. "What transfer?" Dorian answered first. "A routine household arrangement, Your Majesty. It carries the royal grain mark," I said. Helena stepped from the front pew. "Elara, this is neither the time nor place." In my first life, those words had silenced me. Now I looked toward the royal calendar. First day of harvest reckoning. In 12 days, Dorian would replace the wagon masters at Bracken Ford. In 20, the first shipment would vanish. My memories were warnings, not proof. I needed the present secured first. I lifted the unsigned document. This granted Lord Ashcombe use of the Vale seal after our marriage. Since he has refused that marriage, the authority has no purpose. Dorian's eyes hardened. Do not turn disappointment into a threat to the kingdom. I am preventing one. I handed the document to the royal scribe. Record that the betrothal ended before any transfer was signed. No Ashcombe order may carry the Vale seal from this hour forward. The scribe looked to the king. Edric nodded. Maris whispered Dorian's name. He had chosen her believing he would still receive everything attached to me. I bowed once more. May your marriage bring you exactly what you selected. Then I took the Vale seal from the altar. The royal chapel did not recover from my answer. Dorian stared at the transfer, as though the parchment had betrayed him. "You are making a spectacle of private grief," he said. "No, you made your choice before the court. I am separating that choice from my inheritance." Maris stepped closer, wearing the pale blue gown chosen for my wedding feast. "Elara, I never wanted to hurt you." "Then you should be relieved I am not asking you to return him." Helena's face tightened. "Lord Ashcombe acted poorly, but the alliance can still be preserved. Maris will marry him, and House Vale will honor the arrangements already made." "Which arrangements?" "The dowry, the grain authority, the river access." I turned to King Edric. "Your Majesty, none of those documents bear my signature." Dorian forced a laugh. "The feast is prepared. Refusing now would disgrace both houses. You chose another bride at my altar, and I regret the manner of it, not the decision." His silence answered for him. I removed the jeweled betrothal ring and placed it beside the unsigned transfer. "Then there is no dispute. The betrothal ends by your declaration. The Vale dowry remains with House Vale. The northern stores remain under my stewardship. No Ashcombe officer may issue orders in my name." Maris looked toward Helena. "You said nothing would change." Helena seized my wrist. "If Dorian leaves without Vale support, every lord here will say our house cannot keep an alliance." I freed my hand. "Let them say I did not purchase a husband who had already chosen someone else." Dorian's composure cracked. "The army depends on those roots. The army may request grain through the crown. It does not require your private control of my storehouses. You do not understand military necessity. I understand 11 wagons cannot cross a 7-knot ferry cord." His eyes sharpened. I had revealed only enough to unsettle him. Tamsin had not yet shown me the present records. I could not accuse Dorian of crimes he had not committed in this life. But now he knew I understood more than he expected. I turned to the royal scribe. "Record the final hour of Lord Ashcombe's access to Vale documents. Any order issued afterward must be treated as unauthorized until verified." The scribe wrote, "All wedding expenses promised from the Vale treasury are cancelled. House Ashcombe may arrange its new ceremony at its own cost." Maris went pale. Helena whispered, "You would humiliate your own family." "No, I am refusing to finance the humiliation." King Edric rose. "The original ceremony is dissolved. Lord Ashcombe may petition separately to marry Lady Maris. House Vale retains its seal, stores, and ports." Dorian bowed. Maris reached for his hand. The court saw two lovers who had defied convention. They did not yet see the loans, wagon contracts, and promises Dorian had made, because he believed the Vale granaries would become his before sunset. As I walked from the chapel, I heard Maris whisper, "She will come back when she realizes she has nothing left." Dorian answered, "She always does." This time, I kept walking. I left the Vale residence before the wedding feast began. Helena sent servants after me, with trunks, jewels, and the blue cloak embroidered for Lady Ashcombe. I kept only my father's ledger case and the iron box containing the Vale seal. The rest belongs to the ceremony that did not happen. At the eastern gate, I dismissed the guards Dorian had assigned to escort me north. "The roads are unsafe, my lady," their captain warned. "So is allowing another house to choose who carries my seal." I hired crown couriers and required every transfer of the iron box to be recorded. Before sunset, I moved into the steward's house beside the royal granary, far from Helena and Dorian. Then I closed every door I had left open in my first life. Fresh seal impressions went to all Vale storehouses and river ports. Any document bearing the former mark would require confirmation. Dorian lost access to the northern route maps, and the original tally registers went under dual custody with Tamsin. Maris arrived after dark, wearing my wedding pearls. "Dorian needs the Bracken Ford schedules," she said. "Only until the king approves his authority." "He has no authority. The army depends on him. The army depends on grain. Those are not the same thing." Her expression sharpened. "You are punishing us because he loved me. I am protecting property neither of you owns." She reached for the ledger case. I closed the lid. Ask through the crown. After she left, Tamsin entered, carrying a transport order found at the eastern warehouse. It requested 30 wagons of winter wheat for an emergency military reserve. The order bore the Vale seal. My seal had not left the iron box. Dorian's clerk had written that the shipment must depart before dawn. "Shall I stop it?" Tamsin asked. "Hold the wagons at the gate. Keep every driver present. Tell them the order requires my inspection." In my first life, the first shipment vanished 12 days later. Dorian had moved early, and he had handed me proof that this life would not follow the old calendar. The forged order gave me something memory never could. Proof created in this life. At dawn, 30 wagons waited behind the eastern granary gates, while their drivers stood beside the wheels, cold and irritated. Dorian arrived before sunrise. "You delayed military stores," he said. "I delayed an unauthorized order." He held out a duplicate bearing the old Vale seal. "It came from my office under emergency authority." "You have no authority over Vale grain." His gaze moved towards the drivers. "Do you want them hearing us argue about royal supply?" "Yes." That stopped him. I asked each driver where he had been told to deliver the wheat. 4 named a military depot outside the capital. 9 had been given a private warehouse near Bracken Ford. The rest had no destination. They were supposed to receive directions after crossing the river. Tamsin recorded every answer. Dorian called it a clerical error. I released the wagons back into the granary and kept the order. Then we checked the system my father had built before court. Officers decided ink was more elegant than wood and rope. Every storehouse kept a carved tally board, showing grain entering and leaving. At each ferry, the keeper tied 1 knot into a cord for every loaded wagon that crossed. The office ledger was the 3rd record. If all 3 agreed, the shipment existed. At Bracken Ford, they did not. The ledger showed 42 wagons of barley crossing during the previous week. The ferry cord held 36 knots. The tally board showed 36 wagons leaving the western storehouse. 6 wagons existed only on paper. "Could someone add knots?" I asked. The ferryman shook his head. "Not without replacing the cord. I seal the end with blue wax every night." The wax was intact. My first instinct was to take everything to King Edric. Tamsin disagreed. "You can prove false records. You cannot prove where the missing grain was meant to go. If I wait, he moves more. If you accuse him now, he changes the method. She was right, so I chose protection before accusation. I divided the northern routes among 3 stewards. No single officer could order grain, release wagons, and confirm delivery. Ferry keepers began sending duplicate cords to my office. Farmers received stamped receipts naming the granary that accepted their crop. The changes slowed transport. 3 commanders complained. Helena accused me, by letter, of endangering the alliance because of wounded pride. Maris sent something shorter. Dorian says the king will blame you if soldiers go hungry. I filed both letters. By the 4th day, no grain had vanished. That was when my memory stopped helping. In my first life, Dorian had waited almost 2 weeks before replacing the Brackenford wagon master. This time, he replaced him immediately. He also moved his wedding to the following morning. Invitations flooded the capital. Maris would become Lady Ashcombe, and Dorian announced that their union would introduce a new northern supply partnership. No Vale approval existed, but lenders believed it did. Merchants extended him credit. Wagon builders delivered new carts. 2 private storehouses began expanding. Dorian was spending against grain he did not control. That evening, Tamsin placed a lender's copy of his partnership prospectus on my desk. Beneath a promise of Vale-backed supply was a schedule of future deliveries. The first destination was not a royal depot. It was a private warehouse owned by Dorian's older brother. The capital celebrated Dorian and Maris as though betrayal had become a love story. Their wedding filled the royal chapel with white roses and military banners. Maris wore the Ashcombe crest at her throat, while poets praised 2 hearts brave enough to choose love over duty. Helena sat in the front row. My chair remained empty. By sunset, merchants had extended Dorian new credit. Wagon makers promised twice their normal output, and 3 lenders accepted his northern supply prospectus as proof that Vale grain would support his expansion. Maris moved into Ashcombe House and began receiving petitions addressed to Lady Ashcombe. She had everything she believed I had denied her. Nobles who had ignored her for years now competed for invitations to Ashcombe House, and Helena sent me a note saying Maris had finally found the place meant for her. The first crack appeared the next morning. Dorian ordered 60 wagons of wheat from Eastmere. The granary master returned the order unopened. The Vale seal was obsolete. A second order arrived bearing Dorian's military mark. The answer was the same. Royal requests required crown confirmation. Private Ashcombe orders had no claim on Vale stores. The second crack came from his lenders. His wedding loans, new wagons, warehouse repairs, and merchant advances depended on deliveries beginning that week. No deliveries came. Interest and supplier demands did. 2 wagon makers refused further deliveries until old invoices were paid, and 1 lender demanded proof that Dorian actually controlled the grain named in his prospectus. Maris asked Helena why House Vale had not sent the promised dowry grain. I returned the chapel record showing every Vale transfer ended with the broken betrothal. The third crack appeared at Brackenford. A private warehouse owned by Dorian's brother had hired laborers for a shipment that never arrived. 1 worker reported that the building already contained hundreds of Vale sacks. Older sacks. Their harvest markings matched stores officially recorded as spoiled months earlier. Dorian had not begun stealing after our failed wedding. He had been building private reserves long before he chose Maris at the altar. That night, Maris hosted her first banquet as Lady Ashcombe, while Tamsin and I opened the old spoilage ledgers. The first page carried the same warehouse mark. His victory had lasted less than a week. The grain beneath it had been missing for a year. The spoilage ledgers changed the shape of the entire scheme. At first, I thought Dorian had been stealing grain to build a private reserve. Then Tamsin laid 3 years of records across the table. Every season followed the same pattern. Vale grain was marked spoiled, removed from the official count, and transported under military exception orders. The quantities were small enough to avoid panic, but the destinations were always the same: 3 private warehouses. One belonged to Dorian's brother. The other 2 belonged to merchants who had financed his new transport company. I rode to Bracken Ford before dawn with Tamsin and 2 crown clerks authorized to inspect disputed stores. We requested the warehouse records and compared the owner's receipts with our copied tally marks. The sacks inside carried Vale Harvest brands from 6 different granaries. None should have been there. Dorian had been building the reserve long before our wedding. Tamsin opened a merchant contract found among the warehouse papers. The prices increased automatically when northern market supply fell. I read the delivery schedule twice. The largest releases were planned for midwinter, after 3 Vale granaries were projected to report severe shortages. I is creating the shortage first, I said. Tamsin nodded. Then selling the answer. That was what I had missed in my first life. Dorian did not want grain merely for profit. I wanted crisis. If the northern provinces ran short, he could offer his private stores to the crown at inflated prices and present himself as the only commander capable of moving food fast enough to prevent unrest. The worse the emergency became, the more authority the king would be pressured to give him, and House Vale would appear responsible for the failure. Then I found Maris's name, not on the warehouse titles, not on the profit shares, on the loans. Her new household had guaranteed wagon purchases, merchant advances, and payments promised to farmers whose grain Dorian planned to redirect. If the scheme collapsed, creditors would come first to Lady Ashcombe. Dorian and his brother owned the stores. Maris owned the obligations. I returned to the capital before sunset and found her outside my office. You searched my husband's warehouse. I inspected Vale grain. He says you are trying to destroy us because he chose me. I placed the contracts before her. Then ask him why your name carries the debt and his carries the warehouses. She read the first page, then the second. Her confidence disappeared slowly. He said these were marriage investments. They are. Her eyes lifted. What happens if the deliveries fail? You already know, for the first time. Maris did not defend him, but Dorian had moved faster than either of us expected. A royal summons arrived before she finished reading. He had accused House Vale of withholding grain from the army. King Edric ordered an emergency winter provision council for the following morning. Dorian was no longer waiting for famine. I was going to blame me before I could prove how he planned to create it. By sunrise, Dorian had turned my precautions into an accusation. His petition claimed House Vale was withholding grain from the army, delaying military orders, and creating shortages for political revenge. 3 commanders signed statements saying their wagons had been refused. I expected the king to see blocked shipments. I did not expect me to bring the drivers. Before the Winter Provision Council, I gathered every man who had received one of Dorian's unauthorized orders. Tamsin brought the sealed ferry cords, copied tally boards, and the transport order bearing the obsolete Vale mark. Then the first real consequence reached Ashcombe House. A lender demanded payment on the new wagons. A second froze further credit. The Bracken Ford Warhouse stopped accepting deliveries because Dorian could no longer guarantee the next grain. His brother demanded that he restore Vale access immediately. Dorian came to my office before noon. You have made your point, he said. Approve temporary military access, and I will withdraw the petition. You filed an accusation before the king to force you to behave rationally. You mean obediently. His mouth tightened. If the army misses supply, no one will care who stamped which paper. They will care where the grain went. For the first time, he looked toward the ledgers on my desk instead of at me. I knew I had found something. What have you been told? Enough to attend the council. I left without another threat. Maris arrived an hour later. She had removed the Ashcombe jewels from her hair. Creditors came to the house, she said. Dorian told them I control the household guarantees. You signed them. He said the Vale stores would cover everything. And when they did not, she looked away. He said you would come back. He said you always needed to be useful. The words hurt because they had once been true. In my first life, I had rescued them every time the consequences became inconvenient. This time, I gave Maris copies of the loan schedules. Take these to your own advisor. Do not sign anything else. Her eyes filled. Will you help me? I am helping you understand what you signed. I will not make it disappear. While Ashcombe House began turning against itself, the northern routes still had to function. I authorized emergency grain for 2 army posts through Crown requests rather than Dorian's office. Farmers were paid directly at the granaries. Tamsin assigned independent counters to every large convoy. The wagons moved. No province went without supply. That mattered more than watching Dorian fail. By evening, Helena arrived at the steward's house. She looked older than she had at the wedding. Maris says Dorian deceived her. I did. Then you must protect her before tomorrow. From him, yes. From her own signatures, no. Helena's voice dropped. If the king learns everything, House Vale will be humiliated. I died protecting House Vale from humiliation. She did not understand the words, but she understood my refusal. When she left, Tamsin entered with the final ferry cord from Bracken Ford, 9 knots. The royal ledger Dorian had already submitted for tomorrow's council listed 15 wagons. 6 phantom wagons, exactly the difference we needed. Dorian intended to walk before the king, with altered numbers. This time, I would arrive carrying the road itself. The Winter Provision Council filled the throne hall before noon. King Edric sat above northern lords, commanders, merchants, farmers, and granary stewards. Dorian stood near the royal table, with Maris and Helena behind him. He spoke first. House Vale has obstructed military supply because Lady Alara resents the end of our betrothal. Murmurs moved through the hall. I placed the chapel record before the king. Lord Ashcombe's authority to use the Vale seal ended before our transfer was signed. The royal scribe confirmed the hour. Then I presented Dorian's first transport order, issued afterward. An outdated seal does not make the grain unnecessary, he said. No, it shows who ordered it. The drivers described 3 different destinations for the same 30 wagons. Several had been told to wait for new directions after Bracken Ford. Drivers misunderstand changing military routes, Dorian said. Then the physical records should support you. Tamsin placed the tally copy beside the ferry cord. 36 wagons left the granary. 36 knots were sealed at the river. Dorian's royal ledger recorded 42. 6 wagons existed only in ink. I opened the next folder. Across 3 seasons, grain marked spoiled had vanished from Vale inventory and appeared in private warehouses owned by Dorian's brother and financiers. Farmers then confirmed they had delivered healthy grain on several of those dates, while ferry records showed the same loads continuing past the official storage points. I created emergency reserves, Dorian said. Then why did the Crown not own them? He had no answer. The merchant contracts, scheduled that grain for resale after northern shortages, drove prices upward. The larger the shortage, the higher the price Dorian's partners could charge the Crown. Dorian pointed at me. She is creating the shortages now. I produced the Crown requests I had fulfilled. Both army posts had received their grain on schedule. The final documents showed Maris guaranteeing the loans and transport debts, while Dorian and his brother owned the warehouses and profit shares. Maris whispered, "You told me we owned them together." Dorian would not look at her. I faced King Edric. I do not ask you to believe me, because I was betrayed at an altar. Compare the grain, the roads, and the records. The king suspended Dorian's transport authority and ordered every private store independently inspected. The accusation against me had nowhere left to hide. The ink had lied. The wagons had not. After the council, Dorian found me beneath the eastern gallery. "You know what happens if the king removes me," he said. "The army loses experienced command, merchants panic, and House Vale is blamed anyway. You should have considered that before selling a crisis you intended to create." His voice softened. "Elara, I chose Maris because I thought she would stand beside me, instead of questioning every decision. You chose someone you thought would be easier to use." Maris appeared behind him. "He lied to me. You also lied for him." She flinched. "I thought you would fix it. You always fixed everything." Helena joined us last. "We can still save the family name. Let Dorian answer for the rest." For years they had mistaken my responsibility for endless permission. "I made mistakes," I said. "I covered shortages. I ignored warnings. I taught all of you that I would absorb your consequences." Maris reached for my sleeve. "Then help us now." I stepped away. "I am finally allowing each of you to keep what you chose." Dorian kept his ambition. Maris kept her signatures. Helena kept the reputation she had protected above truth, and I kept my name. 1 year later, the first snow fell over the northern granaries. Their doors stood open for the winter count. On one table lay the office ledger. Beside it rested the carved tally boards and sealed ferry cords. Farmers, stewards, and crown clerks checked all three before any wagon moved. I placed my father's old seal beside the new one, engraved with my own name. No wedding ring rested on my hand. Tamsin called from the gate. "First convoy is ready." I watched the wagons roll north, carrying grain to the provinces that had once starved in another life. This time, nothing traveled beneath my name without my knowledge, and nothing owned me, simply because I had once promised to stay.